live from Scotland. He is the master blender of White and Mackay and the master distiller of the Dalmore. You know who this guy is. He's one of my favorite gentlemen in the business. How are you, Richard?
I'm fantastic. Are you keeping all right over there?
We're doing well. We appreciate you joining us from Scotland. And you know, I met you early on in my career of whiskey with Bourbon Blog, and we even had a lesson on nosing back in New Orleans.
We did a video together many years ago, and in fact, it was something you beat me on because we said, "Here's the Dalmore King Alexander." And I said, well, you've got to keep it in your mouth for at least, at that time, at least 1 minute. And I think you kept it in your mouth for about 4.5 minutes. And when you came to drink it, swallow it, you were expecting it to be perhaps a little bit strong. And because you soften up with that length, it just went over like silk. And your face just revealed everything.
It did. You've always said, well, that's what I love, and we'll have to post that on Bourbon Blog again so everybody can see it. But we did. It was a fun video on the nosing, the hello. How do you do it? Show us. It's the hello. How are you? Right?
It's you pick up the glass and you say hello. How are you? Quite well. Thank you very much.
I love how this guy talks to his whiskey, and the whiskey talks back sometimes, right?
That's it, but you've got to give it time. All this knocking it back like some of you guys over there is not really so good. It's about literally holding it top of the tongue, underneath, back in the middle for at least 20 seconds. So you've got to give it time, give it patience. Just like the maturation of our whiskey, you got to give it the same length of time.
Give it time. So if it's about 10 years old, hold it for at least 10. If it's 15,
10 seconds. Yeah, at least 10 seconds. But
how did you come to discover that was the way to do it? I mean, you've been at this for a while. How did you find that, hey, this is the way to do it?
Because a lot of people, you know, I used to, when I first came to America in the sort of 80s, a lot of people were knocking it back. And I used to say to them, hey guys, have you tasted it? And they went, yeah, I've just knocked it back. I said, no, have you really tasted it? You've really got to make full use of your tongue. And, you know, a lot of people, when they did it in the top of the tongue, underneath and back in the middle, suddenly they said, now I know what you mean. I said, well, you've got to take your time. The longer you take, the more you extract from the whiskey itself. It's like great food. You don't just knock the food back, you chew it. The longer you chew it, the more you extract the flavors. Well, it's the same with single malt whiskey, blending whiskey. Give it time and you'll get the reward. But once you've hit it first, always go back to the second time. Second taste is the most important to really see what the whiskey is trying to reveal.
You got to prime the palate to get it ready for that next flavor, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a whiskey that you, on the first taste, you're like, I don't know about this, and then the more you get into it, you like it better? Does that happen sometimes with you?
Yeah, because remember, whiskey is a living person. It's like getting to know somebody. The more you talk to them, the more the personality comes out, the more you like them. And sometimes people are a little bit hidden with their character, their personality. Well, it's exactly the same with a whiskey. So you've got to really, you know, get to know it. And then sometimes it will reveal other things. But that's the sort of excitement about the whiskey, because when we lay down whiskeys of Dalmore 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, when you get into the 40, 45s, the 60s, even, you know, the 50s and 51 more recently, you know, you find out nuances that perhaps you've not seen before. But because they're older, like your grandmother, your grandfather, you don't kick them around. You've got to give them time, and therefore they will express themselves in their own particular time.
Absolutely. No, and they really do. Do you remember a whiskey that you, in your history, that, and not a Dalmore whiskey, maybe someone else's, that you originally didn't like, and then you were like, wait a minute, I do like this? Was there one that you can recall that you?
Well, not too many, because even you know, with some of our Juras Vedekins, Tamnavulans,
Right.
they sometimes took a little bit of time to reveal themselves. But
Right.
you know, quite often, if you take bottles and you've had it in your cabinet for a long time, you know, you need to aerate these whiskeys. You need to put it in the glass, swirl it around. Don't just take it out of the cabinet. You haven't had a drink for, you know, maybe 6 months or what have you,
Right.
which is pretty unusual for you guys. But
Right.
anyway, especially you, Tom.
Right.
So, I've done that myself. I've gone into my cabinet. I've said, oh, I haven't tasted this for some time. And, the vacuity in the bottle is perhaps a little bit larger than normal. Well, once I pour it into the whiskey glass, I tend to swirl it around, get the air to it, and then, almost chambre it, and then you find it opens up. But it doesn't reveal itself immediately. You've got to give it time in the glass, and then things begin to change.
Absolutely. What we're tasting right now here is the Dalmore 18. Tasting some of the Dalmore 18. Tell us about. We'll take a taste of this, then we'll talk about what's been happening in the world. But let's first of all start with a toast here, Richard. Cheers! It's so good to see you, my friend.
Cheers to you too. I'm so glad that I happen to have a bottle of the Dalmore 18 with me. So it's very good. But this is finished in Methuselah sherry. This is a minimum of 18 years, going to 18 to 21, but finished in what we have a long, up to nearly 3 years in Methuselah sherry, which is, of course, from Gonzalez Baez. This is 30 years old minimum, 75% Palomino Fino, 25%, 75% Palomino Fino, 25% Pedro Jimenez. So 127 grams of sugar per liter gives us the style. But when you're looking at this, immediately what you're going to see is that Old English marmalade and that lovely licorice, bitter chocolate towards the end, but still that orange bitter chocolate, which is so typical of the DNA of Dalmore. This is coming in at 43%. So again, because it's 43 as opposed to other whiskeys that are 44, then you're going to just have it a little bit longer on the palate. So a big slanjiva to you, Tom. Nice to see you again.
You too.
And let it go over. 10, 9, 8,
wow.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then that lovely chocolate orange, but you're going to see the licorice and the marzipan. And then what you also see, because of the age of it, you'll see hints of balsamic as well.
Little balsamic. So that does make a big difference. And I'm glad I'm chatting with you today because I do like keeping whiskey in my mouth for a while, but it's so important that we remind ourselves that that's part of the reason whiskey has been aging for so long. Let it do its thing in the mouth with the taste buds. That's incredible because it did kind of have this. Once I swallowed it, do you take a deep breath after you swallow it? Is that what happens?
Yeah, after it happens, it goes down. You get the impact of it, but then giving it that time just to rest just opens it a bit more. So that's why if you take it with a bit of chocolate, afterwards with a black coffee, Nicaragua Java coffee, that helps to just accentuate it. And if you want to go a little bit further, go out into your desk and take out these Cuban cigars. I know you've got them there, Tom, but
I do. I have them not too far away.
Don't tell anybody now. But if you go in there and smoke these very slowly with something like the Dalmore, it really helps to bring these flavors, because the tobacco flavors of the pepper, the cinnamon, the spice, and these deep orange notes can be once again found in the coffee and the cigars, but it can be found in the whiskey. And that's what really complements them all together.
So when you're doing it, and I remember this too, and another time we were together at the INS show in Las Vegas, I think you all had just re-released the cigar malt, right? And
that's right.
There's a video of us having some cigars on this patio overlooking Vegas, and I'll have to post this one too. It's a lot of fun. But we tried that cigar with that malt, and it made a big difference. I mean, that cigar malt really does complement a nice cigar.
Yeah, I mean that again, we changed it over the years, but since we launched it in Vegas, 7, 8 years ago, that is still 70% Oloroso sherry butts, 20% American white oak, and 10% Cabernet Sauvignon from Château Haute Marbouzy in Saint-Estèphe in Bordeaux. But it is a great assemblage, and it's coming in at 44% alcohol. And therefore, when you smoke the cigar with that little extra alcohol, it's the perfect accompaniment with a great cigar and coffee, but a great assemblage. It's done exceptionally well. And even if you don't like cigars, that was our biggest problem when we originally brought the Gran Reserva out in America. People, sadly, thought we were actually maturing the Dalmore in tobacco leaves. That's not how it works. So that's why we had to really ensure this assemblage, whether you like cigars or not, is a great drink on its own too.
How do you like to go back and forth? You have a puff of the cigar, some whiskey. How do you balance all those flavors to make sure they're all coming in a slow and thoughtful manner when you're doing it?
Right. First of all, Tom, no question is what we did, and we've always done it together. You have to have great company, good company.
Yes.
People with patience that like cigars, like coffee, like great whiskey. So what we do normally is pour a large measure of the Dalmore into a good glass, or a lovely crystal glass, then have a sip of really great coffee without the cream, without the sugar, without the milk.
Having
two mouthfuls of that. And when you have the 2 mouthfuls of that, then take a great mouthful of the Dalmore, hold it long in the mouth for at least 30 seconds, let that go over, and then have a bit of chocolate. And then once that passes by, you'll see the combinations of the coffee, the whiskey, and of course, they really will amalgamate together, all 3 of them, and they'll come together absolutely perfectly. But don't hurry it. Just take your time, because when you come to a dinner, what is the most important part? Well, you're eating the food, you can hardly talk. But when you come to the cigars and the coffee and the whiskey, that's a time to totally and utterly relax. You need to take your time. Well, it's exactly the same as that.
Amazing. So you'll start with obviously great company, and that's a given, which is always great. And by the way, great company. I love that you've dressed up. It's so cool. We didn't even plan this. We both have a touch of pink on our tie. Pretty good stuff. I keep on saying that at some point when I show up, I'm going to wear a kilt and surprise you. But
we used to wear the kilt, but you guys over in America always keep wanting to know what's underneath it. That's a big problem over there.
So we'll draw in the cigar. We'll do a puff of that. It'll get on the palate, and then we'll do coffee black, and then we'll do the Dalmore, 30 seconds, and then we'll do the chocolate, and then you'll go back and forth with those elements coming on the palate.
Yeah, normally speaking, quite frankly, the whiskey and the cigar is probably sufficient. The coffee tends to lead up to it. But remember, if it's like a Cohiba Bahiki 56 or Partagas number 2 or 4, these are good cigars, are going to take a long time. So coffee by this time has got a bit colder. So that's why, the whiskey and the cigars are just perfect accompaniments. But again, and what I repeat, it's about having the conversation to go with it. You must take your time and enjoy it slowly, slowly, slowly.
Absolutely. No, that's so important. And we're big fans of the cigar malt. All these, I know that, the first one I think we ever had was the King Alexander together, as we were talking about earlier.
It was.
And you are, any new ones that we're going to be seeing coming from you to help celebrate by the way, your 50th anniversary with the company.
Dalmore White Mackay,
Dalmore White Mackay. That's actually in September.
I started in the way back in 1966 when the Beach Boys were singing "God Only Knows." Mary Quant had a mini skirt, and many other great. I think President Johnson was your 17th, or was it? No, not the 37th president. I think, if I remember right.
I can't remember.
But anyway, all these things going on in the swinging 60s, and it was a good time. But so for 54 years, I've seen many changes, but I must take my hat off. In 1997, we had the first whiskey festival in Germany, and then in 1998, in November, we moved over to New York. And from these whiskey festivals of 1998, really to the present day, that's what brought better awareness to Scotch whiskey, single malts, and even to the small batch bourbons, the Jim Beams of this world, you name it, they were all there at the whiskey shows and are still going on to this very day.
Well, it's really cool because being in the whiskey business, you always obviously did follow Scotch. You followed other international whiskeys. You started in the '60s. What do you think really were for you, the key components of getting whiskey more popular in the late '90s, leading up to today? What was the key ingredients that made that happen? When did you really recognize it? And tell us about that.
Well, that's really people like yourself, Tom, who went on to go do the whiskey shows, did the iPods and YouTubes and what have you. It was thanks to people like yourself that got out and really used the internet. Okay, there was magazines, there was books, there was all these kind of things going on, but it was actually communication with people in an easy manner, just like the same way as we're doing an easy manner
Right.
over the phone to connect up. And thanks to people like yourself, as I said, it brought a wider audience. But what it did do is it captured from America and then it went around the world. So when you go to like Shanghai, that's the last one, just last year, we did Shanghai, and you're talking about 30 odd thousand people attending, the same in South Africa and what have you. These are big attendees
Yes.
that are going, and people not arriving in Zimmers. They're not coming in their Zimmers anymore. These are young, motivated, hungry, innovative people that want to learn more about Scotch whisky. And we have to feed them, not just with the standard blends or the standard single malts, but innovations that are going to capture their imagination. So the Dalmore King Alexander with 6 different finishes that I showed you, I remember that at the time, was something new, something different. And that helped to bring awareness to the Dalmore and many of our other expressions.
Absolutely. And since that time, I mean, you've really grown the types of expressions you've done, and some of these expressions of Scotch. I kind of forget the record, but you helped set one of the records for one of the most expensive Scotches ever.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had for the Dalmore 62 years old, way back in 2002, it was sold for around about $50,000 here in the UK. And that was, at that time, it was unthinkable. And it made people realize for aged whiskies like the Dalmore 62 and then the Dalmore 64 that, these whiskies existed. And just on that, when we talk about the Dalmore 64 years old, the Trinitas, only 3 bottles, 2 in America and 1 in London. They were sold originally around about the $200,000 in the UK, but these bottles now are worth in the region of $1.3 to $1.5 million if you want to try and acquire them now. The sad thing for me is, as much as I love these whiskies, like the 64, all 3 bottles to this day have not been drunk. Now, that's pretty sad because that is 1868, 1878, 1926, 1939. But these are liquid history. And when they go, that will be the end of it. But people are sitting on them, these 3 people sitting on them. And hopefully one day they will share that rare taste. But that's why they're worth that kind of value, that kind of money. It's pure liquid history that will never be repeated.
It'll never be. And have you told them, hey, by the way, when you crack this open, call me up? Have you told them you want to hear it?
Well, I actually say that when we're producing the Dalmore, Dalmore 35, 40, 45,
right.
Dalmore 50, 51, and the 62, 64, these are whiskeys that must be shared with people that you love, that you respect, because this is pure moments that in your life you will never forget. And I mean that seriously. You can't just open a bottle or crack a bottle open. You need to crack it open at the right time with the right people. But really, it's something that when you do open it and you taste it with all the lovely food, cigars, coffee, it's something that will remain in your life for permanently. It'll be something you couldn't.
Absolutely. And you said the oldest one was 18. What was the age? 1800 something?
The oldest one was 1868, 1878, 1926, 1939. These were all the years that were put into that assemblage a way back. And we've got records, at the distillery when they were racked and we looked after them. You can imagine with having these whiskies of that age, the loss was huge. So luckily we had quite a number that we could put together. But, only 3 bottles were actually produced off that 64 at the end.
Wow. So again, that
but all 100% natural strength, natural color.
And only 3 bottles were made.
Only 3 bottles. That's it.
With that assemblage. And again, when you 1800s, there's not much whiskey. How much whiskey is left in the barrel at that time? I mean, how much are we talking?
Well, that's why that's why there was a few barrels, and it was literally just the remnants of it, and that's why the assemblage had to be put together so that we could get the 3 bottles. But it does have, little droplets from that particular era. Yeah.
So what is it? So I mean, you put this together. You tasted some of this really old 1800s. What does the whiskey from the 1800s taste like? Because it had been aging for over 100 years, right?
Well, no, been aging, but the assemblage had gone from one assemblage to another.
Right.
So there were only threads of it when I eventually got it together.
When you got it together.
From the 1939 and all that. So there's only connotations of that. But what it did have was a little bit heavier. Obviously, the extraction of the wood had to be taken into account. But the sherry notes and that sort of balsamic that I talk about, and the licorice, these are when notes of these rarities truly come through, because only age can really open these kind of flavors that are exceptionally rare.
So that flavor that when you were putting these together that you tried, it's big with the barrel, it's big with all these notes just amplified then.
That's correct, because you get, when we talk about the DNA of the Dalmore being chocolate orange, you're talking about something with more fruitcake, more impact, but that will linger longer on the palate. And that's why for these rare whiskies, yes, you need to open the bottle, you need to chambray them, but then you need to let them open up completely and hold it long in the mouth at the right time, right place.
That's really incredible. So what you're making today to go into the barrel to age for 10, 20, 30 plus years, this is some of really the same recipes that the company has always had, right? I mean, this is the same tradition, this is the same recipe, same DNA.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct there, because, Thomas, what we did originally when Andrew Mackenzie, although we go back to 1839, Alexander Matheson got the whiskey distillery underway. But when Andrew Mackenzie arrived in 1867, he in 1874 wanted to double the capacity of the distillery. But what he did was something different. He started to say, instead of having self whiskeys or new spirit, or as you guys call it, white duck, we want to mature our whiskeys. And people used to say, what do you mean mature your whiskeys? We want to let it mature for at least 12, 15, 20, 30 years. And everybody said during these early years, what do you want to do there? What do you want to do that for? Because we've discovered by leaving the whiskeys that a little bit longer, we're going to get the rarities, the beauty of the whiskeys to really shine through. Now, that was started in 1874. And when you think in the 19th of May, 1915, the first whiskey had to be matured by law for 3 years. By law, 1915. Andrew Mackenzie was way ahead of this game. And that's why when we took over, the Mackenzies were there. And then I joined in 66. We had old stocks. And it was due to the policy that he had set down. So, old whiskies like that are not readily available by every company. Only a handful today have these rarities. So we've made full use of it purely thanks to the fortitude of a guy like Andrew Mackenzie.
That's incredible. And it's so much fun talking whiskey with you and history. And let's talk about what's happening right now since the COVID crisis, obviously affecting everyone in the world, affecting you on Scotland. What has been the response of White Mackay, the Dalmore, and how's it affected your all's business and what's going on?
Well, it's obviously we feel that we're not alone
Right.
because all around the world we're suffering, and what we are having to do is to make sure all our members of our staff, as much as possible, we can take good care of them and make sure they're, it's not an easy job. We're doing the best we can, but we've had to obviously cease production. We are keeping our Invergordon grain distillery moving because that's now producing millions of litres for sanitizers, which we're supplying to the UK and further afield. So we're doing our own particular contribution. And I know our parent company, they're doing exactly the same. So, we're trying to do the best we can, but Dalmore will close. It's been closed for a few weeks now, but hopefully, really hope in the month of May, we can possibly get back. But, like our bottling halls and everything else, it's not going to be a quick fix. These bottling halls are going to have to take a number of weeks to get up to full production. So that's quite a long way off. And even the office, we're going to have to take steps to make sure everybody's separated and sanitized in the right way. Protection is what it's all about during this very, very sensitive time. But we will resume and we'll get back to normality. But the burning question is, when will it happen? Everybody's asking the same question. And when it does happen, hopefully, we'll recover in a good way. But it's going to take, maybe we won't be the same, but hopefully Scotch whisky will remain part of that.
Scotch whiskey. Well, it'll remain part of that. What have you been up to since everything's been closed? Have you been doing some of the work from home? What have you been taking time to do since it's been closed?
Well, we're always looking long term. So, for the last number of weeks, the computer here has been working flat out. We've got quite a number of programs that we're putting together.
Right.
We're still doing a lot of interviews, and we're still making sure the stocks will be in place, and trying to keep our many customers aware that as soon as things do get back to normal, we'll be supplying them as best and quickly as possible. It won't be, as I say, a quick fix, but at least we're keeping in contact with them and trying to keep everybody happy. Not much more we can do from there.
Right. Because one of the interesting things you and I were talking about earlier was in most states, and of course we have so many rules in the US, there's so many different rules state by state. In Indiana, where I am, it was you could go into the liquor store for a while. It's an essential business. The liquor stores are still open in Indiana, but now I'm having to call ahead and having them deliver my liquor street side, which is fine. We can do that. But from what I understand, there in the UK, liquor stores have been closed. People are just buying it at the supermarkets. Is that right?
You can buy them still in the supermarket, or you can go online. Remember, you cannot just get up and go to the supermarket and get a couple of bottles of wine or whiskey. That's not, you're not dependent on that. So if you get caught, you can actually be fined. You have to contribute towards that with, milk and essential parts of your life. But again, I would say staying at home and, really appreciating the NHS here, the health service, which is under so much pressure. We're all trying to do our bit to help them.
No, I understand that. So in the UK, if I wanted to get a bottle of whiskey, I would need to be buying other groceries, and that's important.
Yeah, you really should, because, but you can go certainly online. But the only thing is, you can imagine, like all the things that are online just now, the demand for it is huge. You're not going to get it straight away. These poor guys, deliveries or what have you, are going to be inundated. So you've got to be patient on that front. Hopefully, like you, Tom, you've got a few bottles of Scotch whisky, the Dalmore, in your cupboard. And
have a few hiding. Yeah, and for those people, so with regard to your whiskeys, very fine whiskeys, people are ordering them online now to be delivered in the UK. Are they getting harder to find, or some of them getting a little bit more rare because people are rushing to get the fine ones online because they can't get the liquor stores?
No, what you've got to remember, Tom, is that, at this moment in time, a lot of people have been what we call furloughed. The government are trying to pay as much as they can.
Right.
Hopefully that will continue. But, the outlook for money is not as confident as you can imagine. Therefore, people are being very sensible. Yes, at the beginning, people went in, bought a lot of beer, whiskey, wine at the very beginning. But when they realized, actually, this is for long term, that could be affected, the money may not be as lucrative as it was at the present moment. So people have been holding back a little. And, that is our great concern. And don't forget, the travel, the duty free, that's taking, quite a pounding.
Sure.
And, we really don't know how travel is going to get underway again.
Right.
Are we going to be allowed back on the plane, or is it going to be, temperature controlled, or all these kind of things? It's still the unknown. So yes, demand for whiskey is going on, but it's people are still very cautious, and it's quite understandable.
Well, sure, with how they're spending it. And duty free is really something on our series here we haven't really talked about. How, thinking about short term, long term, even once people are traveling again, do you see duty free in some of those special releases, or just buying alcohol and duty free at all? Is that something that you think will really be, even in a few months here, on the decline? What do you predict?
I think as far as travel is concerned, that is going to be severely restricted, and if it's restricted, that has to have, and is at the present moment having a immediate impact on sales. It doesn't matter if it's liquor or perfume, things are going to be a little bit different. So we see more online sales taking place until we know that the safety measures that are definitely required for travel are once again reinforced. But more importantly, are we going to give that confidence back to the consumer?
Right.
Are you going to be feeling safe when you walk into a shop with somebody else, or are we going to be restricted? These are some of the unknowns, but we'll get there. But it may take a little time.
Well, and you're 50 years in the business. And again, I probably should have asked this. When you got into the business 50 years ago, this September 14th is the anniversary. How did you first get started? How did you first, was this something that was in the family, or you just tell us the story?
No, it was all to do with my father.
Yeah.
He had W.R. Paterson Limited. He was whiskey broker, like my grandfather. So I always say the same story. Whiskey runs in my blood. I started training with my father when I was 8 years old. He gave me a drink and at his bonded warehouses here in Glasgow. I only smelt it, but it was enough to get a cuff on the back of the head because I didn't smell it in the right way. So I learned the hard way. But what my father did was he said, you've got to have a passion for whiskey, but you've got to keep learning. So don't think it's going to come easy. And that's why I studied not only whiskey, I studied wine as well. Because my first job, yes, at a company that owned Glen Scotia Distillery in Campbellton, he got me the job. And everybody used to say in the staff, you say, let's face it, Richard, you only got this job because of your poshy father, And I went, well, yeah, maybe that's right. So I was determined to, do my own thing, learn more about wine, spirits, everything about it. And that's why I've always gone by the saying, knowledge is power. When the executive stops learning, he's finished. And I would say that, but more than anything, you have to have a passion. Passion about anything elevates the soul to achieve greater things. And hopefully, over the last 50 years, I've seen a lot of changes. But my passion for whiskey, innovating and trying to produce the very best blended whiskeys as well as single malts has never diminished. It's all about, and talking to you and seeing somebody like yourself, and the consumers that listen into your program. That's what it's about. Because if you can pass on that passion and drink whiskey in the right way through the good times and through the bad times that we're possibly suffering just now, and share it with the people you love, that's all that matters.
That's what really matters. And I was going to say, it's Richard, I think whiskey has kept you young in many ways. And the passion that you have for it has kept you young. You're someone that everyone I talked to, it was just recently in DC, someone talked about seeing your presentation and how amazing it was. And just, people really enjoy your passion, your presentations, and your passion for whiskey is infectious, and it's been inspiring to me as well.
Well, thanks very much, Tom. But, it is such a great program. Okay, you've got American whiskey, you've got your bourbons, your small batches, and everything else. But Scotch, it goes round the world in such a small place like Scotland, yet it can bring awareness to so many things. Our beautiful cities in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and the beautiful islands, the Highlands, you name it. And, over 2 million people now come. Okay, that's been set back, but the enthusiasm. I mean, these whiskey festivals, you should see the people, you've seen them yourself. They're so enthusiastic. They want to learn more, but you've got to give them that information to show that whiskey is different, but it has to be revered and it has to be respected.
Absolutely. And we've always been fans of Scotch whiskey on the Bourbon Blog. I'm especially a fan of the Dalmore and of yours, Richard. For those people that are watching us, there's a lot of fans that are big bourbon fans watching this. And, maybe some of them are younger. They haven't tried as much Scotch. Give us basically your persuasion, your argument for why bourbon lovers who haven't tried Scotch should try Scotch.
Well, let me first of all assure you that bourbon is great. You've got your own bourbons. I'm not gonna. I think they're all great in many respects. So bourbon, Scotch is Scotch. But like the versatility, you've got blended whiskies, you've got blended malts, and you've got single malts. You've got single malts that you don't often see with bourbon going up to, as I say, the Dalmore, 64 years old. 62, 51, 50. These are rarities. These are rare beauties. Yeah, quite expensive. But nevertheless, you can go down, to the sort of younger whiskies, the non-age, like the cigar malt, and the 12 and 15-year-old are more very accessible and, no problem on that front. So it's all about taking your time, but really giving it the time. It matures all these 15 years. Give it all the 15 seconds, etc.
I love it, man. And I think that there's so many bourbon drinkers and whiskey drinkers that are very open to trying new things. And definitely, if you've not tried any of them, which I think a lot of people watching have, but if you haven't tried any of the Dalmore, definitely try the Dalmore. It's such a beautiful Scotch. There is this beautiful DNA, as you've said before, those chocolates, the oranges. Even on the finish of this one, I get so many buttery, just luscious notes from this 18-year-old. It's so pleasant. It's so incredible. As you look forward, so we've talked about looking forward a little bit. What do you think this period of time, COVID, the coronavirus, will it do anything on long term on how we tell the story of whiskey, of how we appreciate it, of what we drink, or just even the whiskey festivals? Is it going to change the landscape of how we get together, enjoy this, and if so, what do you think it'll do?
Not really, but what COVID-19 has done is perhaps made us appreciate our home. It's made us appreciate, the older people that are vulnerable.
Right.
But it's appreciated time. We've had the time. Those that don't have gardens, have only apartments, one bedroom apartments. Time has meant something, but perhaps a lot of the people have looked at whiskey that have been, enjoying it in a different way. They've taken their time and really looked deeply into whiskey, perhaps for the first time. I've already heard that people have said, well, because I've only got the one bottle, I might not get it again. I'm going to savor this. And, every night after dinner with their wife, respective partners or what have you, they brought out the bottle. They've only taken so much because they want to spread it out. But they said, all these nuances you're talking about, 26 different nuances, the flavors you keep talking about. Gee, I never knew they were there. I've discovered for the first time they are there. But more importantly, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying the individual character of single malt and what it's about.
Right. These are times where we can have the time to enjoy those nuances, remind ourselves of how important it is. I think that's so important. So 50 years, September. Any other new releases you can give us?
14th.
They're 14th of September. Any new releases coming? Anything you're working on that you can give us a little hint of?
Yeah, we've got quite a number coming up because, as you can imagine, we're always thinking way ahead, 10 years. So we have got a number, but I can't reveal them all just now. But I can assure you, sort of meticulous attention that we pay to all our whiskeys are done in exactly the same way with these releases coming up. Because, you know, when we're using port or sherry and wine or what have you, it does take a long time, but we will only release them when the time is right and when they can be fully appreciated.
Well said. Well, we'll look forward to the new releases when they're available. Until then, we'll be toasting to you and your 50th anniversary, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us here on our quarantine drinking team series on Bourbon Blog and Slanjava. We'll make sure we hold
Slanjava to you and all your friends in America. Please stay safe, stay well.
Stay safe and stay well. Thanks, Richard. Cheers, buddy.